Hello everyone. Now we will do another problem. It's a little bit tricky but really interesting, and it's problem number 32. So let's read the problem. Modesto Company has these following debts. These are their total debts. So you will see they have unsecured creditors, they have liabilities with priority, and then they have three types of secured liabilities. Well, not all are fully secured, some are partially secured. Now this time we actually don't know what is the free assets. We just know that they have a whole bunch of other assets and that are not placed in any way. So we need to make sure that how much money we can generate from these other assets to satisfy all these creditors. Now here one point it is mentioned that the creditors holding debt to want to receive at least $142,000. So for how much do these free assets have to be sold so that the creditor to debt 2 group's creditor will receive exactly $142,000. So this is really very interesting. So let's think the situation in this way. Look at debt 2. So debt 2 total amount is $170,000, and whatever the asset is used to secure, the value of the asset is $100,000. So debt 2 group holders will receive $100,000 from the pledged assets, but they total want to receive $142,000. Now let's look at what is the unsecured portion. So the total value of debt 2 is $172,000. So this is debt 2's unsecured portion. So total value of debt 2 is $170,000, and it is backed up by an asset which is $100,000. So unsecured portion is $70,000. So now we have to check what's the total amount that debt 2 group creditors actually want. So this is our unsecured portion. Now the problem says that debt 2 creditors totally want $142,000, and of course they will get $100,000 from these assets. So they want to get this $42,000 from this unsecured portion. So debt 2 total wants how much? They want $142,000. Now of course they will get $100,000 from these pledged assets. That means here from this pledged asset they will get $100,000. That means from this unsecured portion they really want $42,000. So they really want to get $42,000 out of this unsecured portion. So that means they really want to receive what percentage of unsecured portion? It's 42,000 minus 70,000. That means if you do this little math, it's 60%. So we have to make sure that debt 2 group actually receives 60% of their unsecured portion. So we have to sell the other assets and we have to raise the money so that 60% of all unsecured debts will be paid. So now let's check what is the total amount of unsecured liabilities. So if I want to calculate the unsecured liabilities, total unsecured liabilities, and you can check what are the liabilities that are unsecured. So let's go back to the problem. So you have unsecured creditors 230. So it's 230, they're totally unsecured. Then we have liabilities with priority. Of course we'll pay them first, but I'm now calculating only the unsecured liabilities. So now let's look at debt 1. Debt 1's total value is 210 and the value of the pledged asset is 180. That means the unsecured portion of debt 1 is 210 minus 180, because if you sell the pledged assets, you can pay them up to 180. So the remainder is the unsecured portion. So here, unsecured portion from debt 1, this is actually 210 minus 180. I'm writing it down in case you cannot figure it out later. This is actually the unsecured portion of debt 1. Now let's see what is the unsecured portion from debt 2. We actually discussed it. The total value of debt is 170,000 and the pledged asset value is 100,000. So the remainder, that means 70,000, is the unsecured portion of debt 2. So I just want to write down everything so that you understand it later. So this is actually the unsecured portion of debt 2. How about debt 3? Debt 3's total value is 120,000 and whatever the assets are used to secure, the value is 140,000. That means the value of the pledged asset is higher than the value of the debt. So debt 3 is fully secured. So we don't need to include debt 3 here. That means if you check this, all these three numbers, 230 and debt 1's unsecured portion is 30,000, debt 2's is 70,000. So total unsecured portion of liabilities is 330,000. Now we know what debt 2 group actually wants, and we need to make sure that debt 2's unsecured portion, 60% of unsecured portion will be paid. That means if we want to make sure this 60%, we need to make sure that this is the total unsecured liabilities and 60% actually should be paid if we want to satisfy debt 2. So now if you take this 60% of 330, take your calculator and do this little number, then you will find here 330 and 60%. That means to satisfy 60% of unsecured liabilities, we need $190,000. Now, don't forget about this group, liabilities with priority. We of course need to pay them first. That means we also need to pay liabilities with priority. So they will be paid first, which is here $110,000. So the company must need to pay these liabilities with priority, and company also needs to pay 60% of unsecured portion. That means these two together, 198 plus 110 is $308,000. That means the company must need to make sure that the company will be able to sell their other assets, and that must be sold for $308,000. So if they raise $308,000, then they will be able to satisfy debt 2's demand. So now we can check it, do some backward calculations. So whatever the other assets they have, those are free assets, not placed in any way. So they must need to sell it for $308,000. So once they sell it for $308,000, they will pay these liabilities with priority 110. Then they will have 198. 198 is the 60% of unsecured liabilities. That means all debt 1, debt 2 will get 60%. Even this other group, unsecured creditors group, will also get 60%. When debt 2 is getting 60%, that means that will satisfy their targeted or demanded portion, which is $142,000. So this is the answer, that the company must need to sell their other assets for $308,000 so that they can meet this debt 2 creditor group's demand. where they wanted $142,000.